A lot of people ask me how I do certain tasks and are sometimes amazed when I tell them the answer. In this episode of the I Can't See You podcast, I talk about how I do things a little different but end up with almost the same result as a sighted person.
From Studio C, welcome to the I Can't See You podcast with David. He can't see, but he's got a lot to say and a face for radio.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 107 of the I Can't See You podcast. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I really appreciate you joining me for today's episode, and Happy New Year to you. Welcome to 2021. I hope it's been so far so good for you this year, and I hope it continues to get better. And I've got a few things to talk about in today's episode, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think it's funny that it's episode 107, and the episode is dropping on the 7th of January. And that is a pretty significant date on our calendar here because it is Jacob's birthday. He was born in 94. It's also my dad's birthday. He was born in 1918. And so I've been thinking about my dad a lot, and I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. I want to touch on a couple of other things first. Because it is Jacob's birthday, that is the official end of our holiday season here. You know, we do Hanukkah, we do Christmas. Then Jane's birthday was on the 2nd, and then Jacob's birthday is, as I said, on the 7th. So that is the official end to our gift giving, cake eating, although Jacob does not want a birthday cake, and everybody but him were disappointed that he wasn't getting one. Though I have to tell you, between the birthday cake and some of the other treats that we ate over the holidays, it was pretty difficult to stay on track, to stay in the low 150s. So I guess that might be a good thing. But it is the official end to our holiday season where there's no more gift giving until, I guess, Liz's birthday in May. We typically don't do anything for Valentine's Day, maybe a little candy treat or so, but typically not a big thing for us. So it marks the end of the holidays for us, and Liz took the Christmas tree down probably about, I think she took it down on New Year's Eve, actually, because there was storms coming and she wanted to be able to get it into the bin and into the shed. So it was out of the way. We do still have our lights up, which I just hate to take down. It's so sad when they come down because then it's at night, it's just dark in the house when you don't have the lights on. And, you know, these are very festive. We have them outlining both the windows in our living room and the windows in our kitchen. And just like at the house in Media when we had them up, you know, we had them on the stairs on the railing, and it looked like a landing strip. So at night when I would go up to bed, everybody was already in bed, of course, because I'm always the last one, you know, to go to sleep. It was just so awesome because it lit the way for me without having to turn on another light. And it's just always so sad to take them down. So ours are still up. We'll see how long we keep them up. We are Z- 4 days before we pick up Ziggy. That is the golden retriever puppy that we'll be picking up on Sunday the 10th, and we're very excited about that. And we've been watching all sorts of training videos, and I'm interested to know if you are visually impaired or blind, or if you know someone who is blind or visually impaired, and they have a dog that is not a guide dog. Have you seen somebody out and about? And I know I asked Simon about this, not during the podcast a couple of weeks ago when he was on. But I just think it's interesting walking, you know, a person who, you know, like me, for example, if I had to take the dog for a walk around the neighborhood, I'd have to use my cane because the dog is not going to be a guide dog. He's going to be a pet. And as I've explained in previous episodes, I'd be afraid for the dog's safety if I were the one in charge of him and he had to guide me because, I'm not that different from the dog. I always want to play and throw a ball. And as I told someone when I was petting his guide dog, at some NFB event, I said, I'm afraid I would hurt a dog if it was a guide dog because, like I said, I would want to play and the dog would get confused. Hey, am I working? Hey, am I playing? And he said, no, it'll be fine. You could just, you take the vest off and he plays and he knows he can play. And I said, yeah, but who's going to tell me when it's time to play and not time to play? So I'm interested to know. So if you know, reach out via email, ican'tseeyoupodcast@gmail.com, or give me a call at 646-926-6350. Leave a message. You have up to 3 minutes. And I'd like to hear the story if you have one about it. I don't know. I've talked to a few people about it, and they don't know of anyone who has a dog that they have as a pet and, takes them out for a walk on their own using the cane. So I'm kind of interested in that. And I'm looking forward to training Ziggy and working with him. And I'm hoping it doesn't take long to potty train him. So we'll see. We'll see how long it takes to do all that. And of course, I will have updates. And we're trying to find the right social media handles for him. As I have with all my social media, I want it to be the same everywhere. Mine is David Benj, as I've talked about, since day one of the podcast. Whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So I want to do the same for the dog. Now, the dog I want to have, TikTok seems to be the place to be for him. So we're trying to find something cool for him, and we haven't found something that's available on. We're mainly looking for Instagram and TikTok and maybe Pinterest for reasons that we may actually start an affiliate site on golden retrievers, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. I've got a lot of other things going on. So getting back to my dad and the birthdays and everything, I got a call yesterday from my cousin who I haven't talked to in quite a long time. And when I say a long time, probably 30 or 35 years. And I wasn't a kid back then. So, and it was very nice to hear from him. It's my cousin. His name is David Shulik. And so we talked for quite a while, and he was talking about his grandparents, his grandmother, and my dad were siblings or step siblings, I guess is the better term for it. But his grandmother, her name was Lil, and my dad were almost the same age. So they were, once my grandfather got remarried to Lil and her sister Teddy's mother, my dad and Lil were buddies because they were very close in age. They were in school together, and so they did a lot of things together. And so I always had, because they were close, and my dad was very close to all his family in general. So, so maybe that's not even it, because he was also close to Lil's sister, Teddy, and again, my aunts and uncles that, I grew up with, same thing. He was very close. We always visited and whatnot. And the nice thing about Lil and Teddy, they lived in the Philadelphia area. So we got to see them all the time. That's where we went on the holidays, whether it was a Jewish holiday or Thanksgiving or something like that. We would get together with them. And, when my parents would go away on these trips, if I haven't mentioned it before, my dad owned and operated supermarkets back in the day, and the company that he got most of his grocery items from was a company called Fleming. They bought out the local company called Thriftway, which was out in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And when they bought out Thriftway, Fleming was the thing, and which was a much bigger company and everything else. But once a year, they had this, I don't know if they called it a conference. I don't know if they called it a convention, but it was basically a trip, and they did the minimal amount of meetings to call it that so it could be a business expense. It was never to a terrible place. It was always to one of the Caribbean islands or Mexico. Liz and I went on a trip that was a Fleming trip to Austria and the Czech Republic, and I think we went some other place, maybe Germany. I guess we landed in Germany and flew out of Vienna. But and they were just awesome trips because they just had so much going on and so many good things. For example, the trip that Liz and I went on, we went through going from I guess it was Salzburg to, oh, I'm sorry, no, we also went to Budapest. Going from Vienna to Budapest, we had a rail car. And when I say rail car, I think it was 3 or 4. That was specifically for our trip. It hooked up in Vienna to the train that was going to Budapest, and then was left in in Budapest while we were doing the day trip there, because the train had continued on. I think it was going to either Sarajevo. It was going someplace in Yugoslavia, which was still Yugoslavia at the time, but they were, the fighting was going on. So it was first class all the way, and it was just a great trip. And when you bought on these, when you bought products, they had certain things leading up to the trip that if you bought X number of cases of this product, you got so much taken off the trip bill. So if you had a couple of stores, you usually got the trip for free. And even if you didn't, if you had a busy store, you didn't have to pay anything for the trip. So my parents would go on those, and my parents were out of the business by the time this trip to Austria and Hungary and the Czech Republic, which Liz and I added on our own. That wasn't part of the trip. We extended a couple of days and went over there to Prague. So every year, and my parents bought that for us. They bought it from an operator that they know that sold it to them. So that guy was kind of double dipping, but whatever. We got to go. It was a great trip. My parents were happy because it was around the time we had just been married a year or two. It was just a great trip. And we knew all the people on the trip because, we had been in business. My parents had been in business with a lot of them. And obviously the people that worked at Fleming in the Philadelphia area, they all knew him. And some of them had been trained by him when they were coming into Fleming. They might say, oh, we need you to, show this person how things work in the market so we can bring him up to speed, and he's going to do this once he works for us. And so they were on the trip as well. And it was just a great trip. But when my parents were in business, they would take these trips, and they were usually in February or March. And my Aunt Lil and Uncle Lou, her husband, my cousin's grandparents, would come and stay with me for a week. And I loved it because it felt like, I was never able to drink anything but milk at dinner. When they were there, I could drink whatever I wanted. I mean, if I wanted scotch, I don't think they'd let me have it, but I never, I never wanted scotch, so I don't know. But so I would drink soda or juice, and it was just a lot of fun. My uncle liked to walk, so we'd walk around the development where I grew up. We'd take our dog. His name was Schnapps. He was a Schnauzer. We'd take him for a walk around, and so Schnapps loved when they were over because he got to go on walks every day, and so it was just a lot of fun. But I don't know how to put this the right way, but and I told David and I talked about this yesterday when we were speaking, and I was shocked. Lou, my Uncle Lou, was very, very tight with money, very tight. So when my parents would leave to go on these trips, my dad would leave the gas credit card in the company. Whether you're familiar or not, Atlantic Richfield had gas stations in this area called Arco. I don't know if they were nationwide. I don't know. But my dad liked them the best because they were on the way to a lot of his stores, and it was easy for him to stop on the way or while he was going from store to store because they were all in the areas that he was. So he would leave this gas card, for my uncle. My aunt didn't really go too many places, but my uncle, still went to work and did whatever he did. And so when my parents would get back and he'd get the bill, he'd look at the bill and he'd see like 5 fill-ups on this Arco card. And the first thing he would say once he would get in the car, once he got back from the trip, long before he got the bill, he's like, oh, my car is on empty. And my mom's car was on empty. So what my uncle was doing, he was taking the card and he was filling his car up and my Aunt Lil's car up, and probably probably David's mother's car up, and maybe somebody else in the family. It was just kind of funny. And so when David and I were talking yesterday, talking about family and stuff, he was telling me about, and Lou and Lil died, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't remember what he said, but they both lived to 100. And when he was talking about them, he was saying how loaded they were. I said, "You're kidding." I just couldn't believe it. And so I bring this up because I was so stunned by it. As I said, the 7th is my dad's birthday along with Jacob's. But on the 7th, on birthdays, like I mentioned last week on Christmas, we went to visit Vincent's grave, Liz's dad. Christmas for him and his birthday for him and Father's Day for him. And for my dad, we go over on Father's Day and his birthday. And, I'm sure we get another one in sooner or later. And obviously, since he's buried next to my mom, we go over, we see them both. So I said to Liz, after I got off the phone with David, I said, "Man, I can't wait to tell my dad." And obviously, it doesn't matter if I say it out loud here, if I say it at the cemetery. It's just, to me, it was hysterical that this guy was loaded. And he probably had as much money or more money than my parents had. And I couldn't believe it because he was so tight with money. Some would call it cheap. But it was just, I was stunned. And he kept reiterating how much he found, thousands of dollars in drawers and all sorts of stuff. And I was just stunned by that. So it made me, talking to him and thinking about those times, growing up. And we both agreed that, every year I used to see my aunts and uncles, a few times a year, like I said, some of the holidays, Jewish holidays like Passover, we would get together with them. Sometimes they'd come to our house. Sometimes we'd go to theirs. And now, obviously all my aunts and uncles are dead. My parents are dead. And so I don't have that. And I was also thinking, as I was telling David the story about walking around the development, I'll share this one thing about my Uncle Lou as well. Because it was in February, a lot of times, there was always snow. I'm talking late 70s, when my parents would do this. And, obviously, once we got to the 80s, they were comfortable once, my friends and I had driver's licenses, and that's a whole other story for me. But, one of my friends would come over and just hang out with me for the week, in case I needed to go someplace at nighttime. I couldn't drive at night. But I would walk around with my uncle, and there's always snow, like I said, and I would always jump in the snow, and sometimes the dog would jump in the snow too. But there were times that I would just grab snowballs and throw the snowball for the dog to catch. And one time I picked up a snowball, and we're walking past this house on Canterbury Drive, and he said, "I bet you can't hit that lamppost." And I loved baseball. Baseball was my sport growing up. Loved baseball, loved hockey. I mean, I loved all sports. Played basketball in the street, played football. Football was kind of discouraged for me because of, everybody was afraid if I, any kind of, if I got hit in the head hard, playing around, it could, further worsen my vision. So I tried not to, if I played football, it was just basically throwing the ball around. But when I was younger, we played kill the guy with the ball. We called it something else. But basically you throw the ball up in the air, person catches it and just runs around and tries to not get tackled. So he says, "I bet you can't hit that lamppost." And I loved pitching and doing the mechanics of a pitcher all the time. I did it when I had a tennis ball in my hand. I'd throw it against the wall and whatnot. So I grabbed this snowball, I, pushed it and made it a little tighter, and I wound up and I threw it at the lamppost. And I hit the top of it and broke the glass in the top. And he said, "We better get going. I think somebody was in the window watching." He didn't want to go in and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, we broke your lamp, we broke your glass." And I just think it's funny. And he told that story every time we were together. Do you remember the time when you hit that lamppost? So it was just funny. So it's made me think of all these family things. And with my dad's birthday coming up and with the kids' birthdays, it's made me think back to when they were little. Some of the things that we were talking about, over the holidays with stuff they got as kids. But it made me think back when I was younger, and vision related, this is vision related. I would say to my parents, I want to do blank. Okay, go ahead. I want to drive a car. Okay, go ahead. And I went to do the test at the DMV in Pennsylvania called PennDOT. And they said, no, your vision, you have to get signed off by a ophthalmologist or an eye doctor. I don't remember what they said. So, we went to our family friend and he did it. And I probably never should have driven. My vision, like I've said, I've been visually impaired my entire life. At best it was 20/60. I think, there was a year or two when I had contacts. I was able to read a couple of letters on the 20/50 line, but that's as good as it got. And it was dumb for me to drive. In fact, I rarely, if ever, drove with anybody else in the car because it just didn't make sense. Why would I drive when there's somebody who's more able-bodied to do it? Especially I don't want to risk somebody's life, if they're okay. Now, there were times when I had a friend, friends, we'd either, had some, not me, had drinks somewhere, whether he had beers or whatever. I drove him home once and then walked home, Now, I don't know what's worse, somebody that can't see but fully sober driving, or somebody that's not sober at all driving. I made it, and it was like most things, it worked out. Like little things, like, for example, I drove him home, and I drove my friend home, and he didn't live far, maybe a mile from my house, maybe a little more. Again, it's not that it wasn't that far, but he had his car over, and he was afraid his parents would, give him the what for. And it might have been even before I didn't really drink too much in high school. Not even occasionally in college. There were times in college, but I've never been a huge drinker. So, he was afraid his folks were going to yell at him. And, and he was still living at his parents' house. So I don't remember if it was college or high school time, but I drove him home. But it was in the winter. It was during one of our winter breaks, I believe, whether it was high school or college. And there had been snow, a week before. So most of the snow was gone, except for the snow that lined the roads. Well, it was, fairly late at night. I want to say it was, 1 or 2 in the morning. And because the snow was there, this is how lucky I got. Because the snow was there, it lined the road for me. It outlined where I had to be. So it made it easy for me, even though I couldn't really see that well. And I was never able to drive at night. I was supposed to be daylight driving only. So I drove this car that I had never driven before at night with my friend. And I'm not going to mention his name. We're still friends. I know my other friends are going to know if they listen who it is. But I drove him home and then walked home. And, and I had no trouble both driving him home and walking. And the walking I didn't think was going to be, an issue because where we grew up was, a bedroom community. There was, maybe 5 businesses in it at the time. Maybe now there's 10 businesses in it, not counting all the people that have businesses in their houses or apartments or whatever. So, there was very little traffic, in the middle of the night. So, walking home wasn't an issue. Now, I had to cross a road where, during a busy time I'd be terrified, especially now because I just don't see enough. And there's not that many traffic lights, in our community that, especially at the time there weren't, where I needed to be there, there weren't, there may be one if I walked a certain way. So, I did that. And, with anything, if I say to my dad, come on, I want to play baseball. I want to play Little League baseball. Okay, go ahead. And I'd sign up. They'd sign me up. There was one year that he sponsored a team from one of his markets, and it was in Chester. And Chester is a city that's very close to here. You probably heard about it on the news from the crime that's in it. But my dad grew up in Chester. Chester was his place. He loved Chester till the very end. And it made him sad when, things were not going great for it. But, so I played the field that they had. It was just outstanding. It was much better than the local baseball that I played in our township. So it was nice. It was a proper field with a fence and lights and a scoreboard and a PA announcer. I didn't like the PA announcer when I was pitching, and I hit like 3 batters, one game, and I just loved it. It was a whole uniform. It wasn't just a T-shirt with a number on the back. So it was a lot of fun, and they let me do it. And, fortunately I didn't get hurt. I wanted to play the violin when I was in 2nd grade. We got a violin, and then everybody realized that I couldn't see the music, and nobody had an answer on how to do a workaround. Now today, you that happens, and you go on YouTube or you talk to somebody, and somebody's got a fix for it. Stuff like that. And so they were always, both my folks always let me I was able to do my own thing. And I don't know, that's helped me so much with how I am now. I'm not afraid to take a look around somewhere. I was on with Max Ivy on his podcast a while back, episode 54 of his podcast. And if I could find the link to the show on his site, I'll link to it in the show notes. And we were talking, and we had met right before Podfest, as I've mentioned before. But I was happy to figure out where I needed to go to get him someplace. And I do have probably a little bit better vision than him. I don't know how much better. But I wasn't afraid to look around, and I'm not afraid when a group of us had ended up leaving an NFB meeting, a chapter meeting in Philly, and we all had to work our way back. I don't know if we had we had like a social gathering after at a restaurant near where we meet, but we figured out how to walk underground. We said, we could walk underground all the way to the station. It would be great because it was a cold day. And I said, come on, let's try it. And we went down in this creepy elevator that a couple of the people were a little afraid of. It smelled like urine, like somebody had slept in there all night and, also used it as a bathroom. But we got down to where we needed to be, and we found our way. And we found our way because I found the way. I went in front of the group and I looked around, and, my folks allowing me to try all those different things, helped me out with, hey, okay, I can't do something a certain way. Maybe I can't do it the way you do it because you can see how to do it, but I figure out a different way. There's always another way. There's always another way to do something. So, so I keep thinking about that my parents let me do all these things. And sorry, I'm thinking about the cemetery again and what we're taking over to my dad for his birthday. And he loved Whoppers, the malted milk balls. So we're going to take him a couple of those. And we had gotten a gift tray. Liz's sister had given her a gift tray that her mom got and that they weren't going to eat. So they gave it to us when we had stopped over on Christmas Day. And my dad loved cashews. At the end, we were getting him these big containers of cashews from BJ's and Costco, and he loved those. So that's his birthday present. And so they let me do and try just about anything. And that was always at least my philosophy. And I think Liz was on board with that. When our kids were little, they said, I want to do this. And, there were times that they would then say, oh, no, I don't like it. But we paid X number of dollars. You've got to stick with it at least until the end. Jacob did ice skating lessons with his friend Shay, and I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks, and but halfway through he got a little tired of it and didn't want to do it anymore. And we said, look, we paid for it, you got to do it. And what happened as they got a little older, if they wanted to do something, we'd say, okay, you're going to pay for it with your money, and if you complete it, we'll give you the money. And that worked, and that helped them. They tried it, and if they didn't like it, they knew they had to stick with it and nothing was, wasn't like they had to do it for months and months and months. Most of it, 6 to 10 weeks were the things that they signed up for. Sports, if they signed up to play sports, which Jacob didn't do too much of. Jacob played a year of baseball, Little League baseball in Media Little League, and maybe 2 years of soccer. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years. And Jane obviously played a lot more. Jane played soccer and softball and Little League baseball, actually. She started out in baseball, and 1 year she signed up for Little League baseball because her friend was signing up for it. They were the only 2 girls on the team, and her friend stopped coming after like 2 or 3 games of a 10 or 15 game season. And Jane said, she doesn't come anymore. It's boring. And, we said, but you signed up, and, they count on you to show up, and, they like having you on the team. Jane has always been good at sports, and, she was great at baseball. And then once there was softball that was available in our area, she switched over to that. And that was, again, that was always fun for us too, because we got, for me, it was getting out and socializing. And that's, one of the things that I'm a little worried about now here, that we moved into the house, because, at least when we were in the apartment, and I was on the board, I always had somebody to go to talk to see about something or this or that. Now that we're here, once Jane gets back into her office in New York, which, maybe this summer, maybe in the fall, whenever, and Jacob's at work and Liz is at work, it's going to be me and Ziggy. So I'm going to be talking to the dog a lot, and hopefully I'll be able to train him. And I guess towards the end, when we lived in media, Zamboni died in 2003. 2004. So maybe that'll help with me being by myself most parts of the day that we're here, because that is something that that I'm concerned about. I don't know if anybody else is in the house, because they'll all be doing their own thing. So, but we've always let the kids try stuff. Getting back to that topic, just like I was able to try stuff. And again, a lot of the things, maybe they wouldn't let someone who's visually impaired try today. Like, I don't know if I have vision, if a kid has vision like I had when I was playing Little League baseball, and I was, at the time, for most of my childhood, my vision was 20/70. And I don't know if they would allow them to sign up. Would they allow a kid? I mean, because it's, again, a huge liability, I would think. And the coaches knew it. The coaches rarely played me in the infield because they didn't want me getting hit with a ball. But it'd be interesting to see, how they handle that now. Again, I never got drilled with the ball much. I mean, when my dad and I would play catch, there were a lot of times the ball hit me. And he was, I think he was happy when it hit me, because if I got hit hard enough, we would end and go inside. But I don't know if you ever played catch with your brother or your parent, one of your parents. I always had this rule, and Liz brought it up because I recruited Liz to throw football around with me when we were in media before the kids were old enough to throw it around. And I always had this rule: you had to do 10 without dropping them to go inside. And she hated that rule because, I didn't want just a normal catch. I always like to try and stand either in the street or in the driveway. Like, like when the wide receiver catches the ball tries to keep both feet in, I'd have her throw it further and further out off of the driveway to try and, to stay in bounds and, fall over. And, but again, as my vision got worse, that got harder, and I got this bright orange football that we used, and I think it actually was an O.J. Simpson football. If you, I'll have to see if she can remember, but it just got harder and harder, and now of course I don't get me wrong, we still throw stuff around. Here in the house, we have a closet upstairs that has, a lot of goods like paper towels and tissues and toilet paper and whatnot. And when we need paper towels in the kitchen, if somebody's upstairs, I'll yell upstairs, "Hey, when you come down, bring the paper towels." And Jane says, "Oh, I'll get it right now." I say, "Oh, great." I said, "Throw it down to me." It's one day it's going to hit me right in the nose. I know, but I like playing around. And again, this is why I won't have a guide dog ever, because it would be bad for them, because I'm the problem, not them. So that is what I have for you this week. I hope things have been going well so far this year for you. And please remember, if you need some coffee, want to try some great coffee, White Cane Coffee Company has some good options. And Jacob was just saying to me the other day that he wanted something that had more caffeine in it. He needs that. He needs that boost. And so, unfortunately, we use a Nespresso machine, and I don't think they make the refillable pods that you can use for that. So we can't try it with that. But you can certainly try it with the Keurigs and the other things. But if you want to try White Cane Coffee, and you should, please use the affiliate link of the Keystone Chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania, of which I am the treasurer and going to be reelected treasurer this coming Saturday. That link, easiest way to get to it would be ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. And again, I Can't See You sounds like a whole sentence. It's only 7 letters long. ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. I really appreciate you joining me for today's episode. Again, it's episode 107 of the I Can't See You podcast. I am David. Please continue to stay safe. And again, happy and healthy New Year to you, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the I Can't See You podcast. Follow David on Twitter. He is at David Benj.